Chapter 1296. How did this happen? She cried out in alarm. She saw that her brother's hand was swollen red and swollen. In just a short while, his hand had swollen to twice its original size. It was as thick as a bear's paw. What shocked her the most was that when she reached out to touch it, it was as if she had touched a piece of fire. She quickly withdrew her hand. "Brother Crown Prince, let's go back quickly. Let's see what happened." She supported him. She thought that even though his body was gradually recovering after taking a level 6 fatality recovery pill, it would still take a few days for him to recover to his original state. Now that his hand was swollen for no reason, what should she do? Prince Qishui stared at his hand. After recovering from his astonishment, he seemed to be deep in thought. He remembered that this was the hand that tore that woman's clothes. Could it be? When he thought of this, his eyes flickered. If that was the case, why couldn't the doctor who examined him find anything? Could it be that that woman was an expert in using poison? Last time, he almost collapsed. This time, his hand was swollen like a bear's paw. This was all her doing. The burning sensation on his hand spread from his palm to his body. It was painful and unbearable, causing large beads of sweat to seep out of his forehead. He endured the intense burning sensation until it was difficult to breathe. He gasped for air and allowed his sister to support him back. However, when he passed by, he saw the two accompanying people. When he saw them, his eyes turned gloomy. To think that he, the dignified Prince Qishui, had fallen into their hands again and again. It was truly hateful. When Xianyuan Mose walked over and saw Prince Qishui, his eyes turned cold. However, when he noticed the red and hot palm, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Princess Yingxue stared at the woman in red who was wearing a veil and gritted her teeth. She supported her brother and was about to walk past them. At this moment, she heard the woman's voice that was filled with laughter. "Prince Qishui, why is your hand red and swollen? Is it serious?" Feng Jiu smiled as she looked at the Qishui crown prince, who was having a hard time holding back. She was overjoyed. She dared to tear her clothes. Was it so easy to tear her clothes? "Miss, you're quite capable." He gasped for air and stared at the woman in red. He saw that her eyes were full of smiles. "This is my reward for tearing Prince Qishui's clothes. You don't have to thank me. It's you. You poisoned Brother Crown Prince." Yingxue asked. If Crown Prince Xianyuan wasn't here, she would have pounced on her face. "Poison? No, how could I poison the Qishui Crown Prince? You are my guests. Of course, that." She shook her head and said. When she saw that Princess Yingxue was about to attack her, she kindly reminded her, "Princess Yingxue, don't get too close to me. I still have some medicinal powder with me. By the way, do you smell any fragrance?" When she said this, Prince Qishui and Princess Yingxue's expressions changed. They didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly left. Looking at their fleeing figures, Feng Jiu couldn't help but chuckle. So cowardly. Chapter 1297. What did my imperial father say to you? He led her to the pavilion and sat down as he asked. He asked me a few things, like how I met you and such. She smiled and said, "I feel that he is not as unreasonable as you say." Hearing this, he pursed his lips and did not ask any more questions. Instead, he said, "When we entered the palace, you only ate a few pieces of cake. Are you hungry? I will have someone bring some food over." As his voice fell, he called out. Ying Yi and Hui Lang, who had been following far behind, came forward. "Master, have the imperial chef bring some food over," he ordered in a deep voice. "Yes." Hui Lang responded and turned to leave. In Yi stood guard outside the pavilion. Not long after, food was placed on the table in the pavilion. Feng Zhou, who had taken off her veil, accompanied Xianyuan Mose to eat in the garden. The news naturally spread in the palace. When many concubines in the palace heard the news, they were shocked and curious. However, they did not dare to provoke the woman in red. Accurately speaking, they did not dare to provoke Xianyuan Mose. He was someone who dared to go against the monarch. If they went forward, they might be killed at any time and no one would seek justice for them. In the palace, Feng Zhou and Xianyuan Mose lived in the same palace. However, they were not in the same courtyard. In the evening, a palace servant came to Feng Zhou's courtyard. Feng Zhou, who was not wearing her veil, was talking with Xianyuan Mose in the courtyard. "Miss Feng, the monarch invites you." Hearing this, Feng Zhou glanced at Xianyuan Mose and stood up. "I will be back soon." When she turned to leave, her hand was grabbed by him. "I will go with you." The palace servant lowered his head and braced himself. "Your Highness, the monarch said that if you follow him, he will keep Miss Feng in the palace for 10 days to half a month and will not allow her to return with you. In fact, the monarch's original words were, 'If he dares to follow me like a shadow, I'll tell him that I'll keep his woman in the palace and he won't be able to see her for 10 days to half a month.'" Xianyuan Mose's face darkened when he heard the servant's words. Feng Zhou chuckled. "It's fine. I'll go take a look. Wait for me here. Why don't you return to your residence first? I'll wait for you here." Xianyuan Mose took a step back, thinking that there shouldn't be any problems. "Yes." Feng Zhou responded, then followed the palace servant out. When they arrived at another palace, she saw that there were no less than 100 small plates on the long table. Each plate was filled with exquisite and small delicacies. She was a little surprised and her eyes flashed. Even at home, she didn't have so many delicacies prepared. Moreover, they were so exquisite. There were many things she had never seen or seen before. Looking at them made her feel a little hungry. The monarch, who was sitting at one end of the long table, glanced at her. Seeing that she couldn't move her eyes away from the delicacies, he snorted, "Why are you standing there in a daze? Why aren't you coming over to serve this emperor?" "Ah." She looked at the monarch in astonishment. "Serve this monarch?" The palace servant stepped forward carefully and whispered, "Miss Feng, you have to serve whatever the monarch asks you to." Chapter 1298. "Look at the food yourself," he said in a deep voice. Seeing this, Feng Zhou glanced at the food on the table and used a larger plate to pick up a few dishes. "Then try these." She first picked up some light dishes for him to eat, but she saw that he only took a bite of each dish. He moved to another plate and pointed at the pork shoulder in the middle. "Pork shoulder, give this emperor some." "Okay." She smiled and followed his finger to pick it up. But soon, she realized that he was very picky when it came to food. He only took a bite of each dish, and only the pork shoulder was enough for him to eat 2 pieces. The food on the table was almost untouched. She saw him put down his chopsticks. "Your Majesty, here's the freshly brewed spiritual tea." She brought the tea forward. He glanced at her and took a sip. Then, he used the tea lid to gently scrape the tea. His deep voice was dignified. "Tomorrow morning, help this emperor collect the flour due to brew the tea. You have to use what you collected yourself and can't let others do it." "Okay." She smiled in response. Was he testing her? Seeing that he was Xianyuan Mose's father, she would do whatever he said. Seeing that she agreed without hesitation, the monarch didn't say anything else. He just stood up and walked out. Seeing him leave, Feng Zhou blinked and looked at the palace servant. "Is the monarch going back?" "He's going back." The palace servant replied with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the beautiful woman who had been standing just now casually sit down at the long table. She picked up the food with her chopsticks and started eating. The corner of his mouth twitched and he was a little stunned. She actually dared to sit down and eat the monarch's imperial food. This courage was a little too big. What's on this plate? She picked up a lotus-shaped pastry and asked. Other than some that she picked up and put on the plate for the monarch, the rest of the food was almost untouched. Thus, she sat down and ate. Since it was nothing, it would be a waste if she didn't eat it. This is a lotus cake. It's made from fresh lotus flowers. It's fragrant and has the effect of calming the heart and lowering the heat. The palace servant quickly went forward to answer. Oh. Then what about this? She ate the lotus cake and picked up another one. This is. Fingzhou sat there and ate as the palace servants chatted with her. They watched her eat a lot of food with a great appetite, as if she had come here to eat. Her carefree and casual manner made the guards in the palace secretly glance at her. When the monarch found out about what happened after he left, he was slightly surprised. Then, he smiled and said, "That little girl is really open-minded. Let her be." He didn't know what kind of family had raised such a woman. It was said that Prince Chishue's hand was swollen, but the doctors couldn't find the cause. This made him have a whole new level of respect for her. Even Chishue's accompanying doctor couldn't find the reason. It seemed that this woman was really skilled. Xianyuan Mose, who was waiting in the courtyard, couldn't help but smile when he heard that Fingzhou was having a meal there. He felt relieved and went back to his room to rest. It wasn't until the sky darkened that he heard Hui Lang talking to her in the courtyard. He walked out of the room and saw the smiling person. He walked up and asked, "Are you full?" Chapter 1299. What do you want to eat? I'll get someone to make it for you when we get back. He held her hand and tucked her hair behind her ear with one hand. Okay. She smiled and replied happily. Then, as if she thought of something, she asked, "Have you eaten yet?" "Master hasn't eaten yet. He's been waiting for you to come back." Hui Lang interrupted. Hearing this, she looked at Xianyuan Mose and asked, "What do you want to eat? I'll get the kitchen to make some food and send it over." "No need. It's fine even if I don't eat. Also, I don't have anything in particular that I want to eat." "How can that be? If you don't eat until tomorrow, it won't be good for your body. How about this? Come with me to the kitchen. Let's go." She pulled him out. When Grey Wolf and Ing Yi saw this, they also followed behind. Because it was already past dinner time, although there were still many things in the kitchen that could be eaten immediately, Fingzhou didn't touch them. Instead, he got Xianyuan Mose to wait for him outside the kitchen. He rolled up his sleeves and planned to personally make some food for him. "Master, the ghost doctor is planning to personally make dinner for you." Hui Lang saw that his master kept looking inside and said enviously, "I heard that the ghost doctor's cooking skills are actually quite good, but I haven't had the chance to try it." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose glanced at him coldly. Then, he got up and walked to the kitchen door. He stood there and watched the red figure busying herself. Inexplicably, his heart softened into a bowl. He only felt a warm current surging in his heart, filling his heart. At this moment, he only felt that his heart was peaceful. In his eyes, there was only the figure busying herself for him. This warm feeling was as if his heart had found a place to belong. It was very strange. It wasn't rice, nor was it porridge, nor was it dessert. She only made a bowl of noodles. She thought, he's already tired of eating those things. Then, she'll just make a simple bowl of noodles for him. Perhaps his appetite would be better. From kneading the noodles to boiling the noodles in the water, and then to putting the noodles into a bowl and arranging the side dishes, it took a full hour. When a bowl of steaming hot noodles was brought to the table outside from her hands, she said with a smile, "Okay, have a taste." "How does it taste?" "All right." He nodded and sat down at the table. He looked at the simple and ordinary bowl of noodles in front of him, but after she made it, it became not simple. There are vegetables, eggs, meat, and green onions. "I'm hungry just by looking at them." Hui Lang rubbed his stomach and looked at Fengzhou in a fawning manner. "Ghost Doctor, you seem to have made quite a lot. Do we have a share in it?" "It hasn't been cooked yet." Hearing that, Fengzhou chuckled. Just as he was about to say yes, Xianyuan spoke. "If you want to eat, go make it yourself. That's mine," he said domineeringly as he picked up his chopsticks and started eating. These were noodles that Fengzhou made for him. Did these two people want to eat them? Think about it slowly. When the three heard his words, they couldn't help but be startled. Hui Lang looked at the bowl of noodles in front of him and asked, "Master, can you still eat after eating such a big bowl of noodles?" Hearing that, he glanced coldly at Hui Lang. Then, he turned to look at Fengzhou and said, "Leave the inside for supper tonight." Chapter 1300. Hui Lang and Ying Yi looked at each other and thought to themselves, Master's appetite is really good. Since Master had spoken, they didn't dare to eat the Ghost Doctor's noodles. However, seeing Master eating with relish, their stomachs couldn't help but grumble. "I don't want to eat the Ghost Doctor's noodles. I'll go to the kitchen to find something else to eat," Hui Lang said as he walked into the kitchen and took out some snacks. Fengzhou couldn't help but smile when he saw this. He sat down at the table and supported his chin with one hand as he looked at the man eating noodles. His heart felt warm and happy. Until he finished the noodles in his bowl, she said, "Let's go for a walk. Let's help with digestion." She held his hand and stood up, saying to the two people at the side, "If you haven't eaten, then quickly go and eat. There's no need to follow. Nothing will happen in the palace." Saying this, she left with Xianyuan. After watching the two leave, Hui Lang sat down at the table and asked, "Ying Yi, do you think the monarch is satisfied with the Ghost Doctor or not?" Ying Yi sat down and said, "Who knows what the monarch is thinking? However, he should be observing her to see if the Ghost Doctor has the qualifications to be the woman by Master's side." Hearing this, Hui Lang nodded and said in agreement, "That's true. Since the monarch is the ruler of Xianyuan Empire and is Master's father, although he doesn't have a good relationship with Master, he definitely won't allow the woman by Master's side to be too weak. If it were any other father, they would find the best and most outstanding woman for their son. They will take care of Master's matters. We don't need to worry about this." Ying Yi said and glanced at Hui Lang sitting opposite him. "Why didn't you take 2 pairs of chopsticks and use your hands instead?" The gray wolf ate a crystal dumpling and reached out its paw to pick up another one. After hearing his words, it paused and continued, "This is convenient. Besides, I forgot to take my chopsticks just now. It's no big deal to make do with it." After saying this, he stuffed another crystal dumpling into his mouth. Seeing him sitting there without eating, he asked, "You're not eating? Are you not hungry?" "I'm not a wolf. I eat with my claws." Ying Yi stood up and walked to the kitchen. Not long after, he came out with a pair of chopsticks, a cup of stewed soup, and some snacks. "Why didn't you give me an extra pair of chopsticks?" Hui Lang asked with his eyes wide open. Ying Yi glanced at him. "Didn't you say that it's more convenient to use claws? And I see that you're almost done eating." "What claw?" "This is my hand." He glared at him. After finishing his food in 2 or 3 bites, he stood up and said, "Take your time to eat." As he spoke, he strode away. Ying Yi ignored him and continued eating his own food. The next morning, before the sky was completely bright, Fengjiu left the courtyard and headed for the imperial garden. She did not forget that she had promised to collect dew to make tea for the monarch today. Although this kind of thing could be done by other people, she had been specifically asked to do it. She could only bear with the sleepiness and get up early. She yawned and came to the imperial garden. Looking at the beautiful flowers in the garden and the dew condensed on the petals, she thought for a moment. Did they collect dew drop by drop? If that was the case, then she wouldn't be able to collect enough dew to make a pot of tea even if she spent a few mornings. Chapter 1301. Standing in front of the flowers, she condensed a spiritual aura in her hands. With a point of her finger, all the dew in the flowers in front of her was sucked up, condensing into a thin column of water and falling into the bottle through her finger. In the dark, the shadow guards who saw this scene were slightly surprised. Using spiritual energy to gather dew was not something that an ordinary person could do. One had to know that this was only collecting dew. If one did not control their spiritual energy well, not only would it destroy the flowers, the dew would also evaporate into mist. In the past, the dewdrops that the monarch drank were collected by the palace maids when they woke up early in the morning. No one had ever tried to use spiritual power to collect dewdrops from the eyebrows and eyes. Moreover, it was successful in one try. When Fengjiu used her spiritual energy to collect the dew, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. If this dew was added to some spiritual herbs to make a concentrated fragrance pill, would it be excellent? Apart from the fragrance of the dew, it was also a rootless water. If it was used to make pills and medicine, thinking of this, she had the urge to try making pills. However, she knew that it was not good for her to make pills here. She could only suppress this thought. After all, if she made pills, it would be good if she succeeded. If she did not succeed, who knew what would happen and what would happen? She went forward to look at the dew in the bottle. It was less than half a bottle. Thus, she changed to another place and collected the dew again. She used less than an hour to collect all the dew in the imperial garden. She kept a small bottle for herself and took the rest to the palace to find the palace maid from yesterday. This is the dew. Take it and leave it for the monarch to make tea. Fengjiu gave the dew to the palace maid. She turned to leave, intending to go back and catch up on sleep. This dew. There's so much. The palace servant looked at the full bottles in astonishment. Was this really collected by her? Could it have been mixed with water? Thinking of this, his expression could not help but become strange. It could have been mixed with water. Otherwise, how could she have collected so much in just one morning? Fengjiu glanced at him and knew what he was thinking. Thus, she said, "Don't worry, it's flower dew. It's not watered." As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her hand and walked outside. On the other side, the monarch's sharp eyes moved slightly when he heard the secret guard's report. Oh? She actually has such ability. Yes, and she's very skilled. The secret guard replied in a low voice. In fact, he was ordered to keep an eye on that woman. From the forest last time, he could see that she was not ordinary. Moreover, her skills were better than the Chishue's third princess. Even Prince Chishue was not her opponent. If they weren't from the imperial family of the 8 great empires, they might be from some aristocratic families. The monarch listened thoughtfully and did not speak for a long time. Fengjiu, who had returned to the courtyard, yawned as she entered the door. Once she felt sleepy, she became even more sleepy. She even felt like she couldn't keep her eyes open. Especially since she had only used about an hour to collect the flower dew. In addition, the sky was not completely bright yet. The dusky sky made her feel like it was still late at night. After entering the room, she took off her coat and threw herself on the bed. She pulled up the quilt and continued to sleep. Chapter 1302. And she was the only one on the bed, so she didn't go to the wrong room. Thus, without even opening her eyes, she fell into a deep sleep, curled up in the blanket. When Xianyuanmos finished washing up and walked out, he didn't see anyone at the table. When he walked into the room, he actually saw her curled up in the blanket, sleeping. He couldn't help but stare blankly, then shook his head with a smile. He didn't wake her up, but walked out of the room, gently closed the door, and went to the courtyard, calling out, "Ing-yi. Master." A black-clothed figure instantly appeared in front of him. Where did she go so early in the morning? In his impression, if there wasn't anything important, she wouldn't wake up early. Which time didn't she wake up naturally? Looking at her, it was obvious that she hadn't woken up yet. Otherwise, how could she have entered the wrong courtyard and entered his room? The monarch ordered the ghost doctor to collect the 100-flower dew, so she left before the sun rose. When she came back, she was sleeping while walking, so she crossed her courtyard and entered Master's room. Ing-yi said with a smile on his face. Hearing this, Xianyuanmos was silent, looking at the room for a while without saying anything. After a while, he ordered, "Have the kitchen cook some porridge and prepare some side dishes. Wait for her to wake up to eat." "Yes." Ing-yi replied, and went out to give his orders. When it was close to noon, Fengzhou finally woke up. Only, when she woke up and saw the person sitting by the bed reading a book, she was stunned. "Why did you come to my room so early in the morning?" Xianyuanmos hooked his lips, and a smile bloomed on his lips. He patted her head with the book in his hand. "Stupid woman, look whose room this is." She blinked, looked around, and was slightly surprised. Then she smiled embarrassedly and quickly sat up. "So it was me who walked into the wrong room. I was thinking that it was still warm when I lay down in the blanket, but I didn't touch anyone, so I ignored it, hee. I've asked someone to prepare some food. Get up and eat. If you haven't slept enough, then continue sleeping." Hearing this, she rolled her eyes. "I'm not a pig." She lifted the blanket and got up, saying, "Bring me the clothes by the bed." Xianyuanmos stood up, put away the book in his hand, and handed her clothes. After she got dressed and washed up, he walked out. However, before he could sit down in the courtyard, a palace servant came in. "Miss Feng, the monarch invites you in." Upon hearing this, Xianyuanmos's face darkened. He said directly, "Get lost." The eunuch couldn't help but lower his head. He didn't dare to speak, but looked at Fengzhou. "I'll go take a look. You eat first. Don't wait for me." She patted his arm and pulled him to sit at the table. "I'll go with you." He stood up after being forced to sit down. He held her hand and walked out. "Sai!" Fengzhou shouted. She had no choice but to let him go. When they arrived at the palace, the monarch was sitting in front of a long table with squinted eyes. On the long table was a table full of delicious food. What was different from yesterday was that there was a chair and a set of chopsticks beside the monarch today. At this moment, a man in gray came forward and whispered a few words in the monarch's ear. The monarch opened his eyes and sneered, "Does he think that I'll eat his woman?" Chapter 1303. Yes. The gray-clothed man replied with a hint of a smile in his eyes. The monarch and the crown prince had never eaten together before, so he must be looking forward to it. "Monarch." Fengzhou was led in by Xianyuanmos. She let go of his hand and bowed to him. "Father." Xianyuanmos's voice was indifferent as he called out. "This monarch told her to come, why did you follow? Are you afraid that I'll eat her?" The monarch snorted and glanced at him. Then he said to Fengzhou, "Why are you still standing there? Sit." "Ah." Fengzhou was listening to him scold Xianyuanmos. She was startled when she heard his voice. What awe! I told you to sit down and eat with this monarch. Hearing this, her eyes lit up. She stared at the table full of delicious food and smiled happily. She pulled Xianyuanmos to sit down. Thank you, monarch. Xianyuanmos glanced at the 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks that were prepared, but he did not say anything. Eat. After eating, go back to where you came from. Don't be an eyesore here every day. The monarch said with a straight face, as if he was tired of them. As soon as he finished speaking, he picked up his chopsticks and started eating the food that the palace servant put in front of him. Fengzhou's eyes flashed. She looked at him, then looked at Xianyuanmos. She did not say anything, but she stood up and put some food on the plate. She brought it to the monarch. Monarch, tell me what you want to eat. I'll get it for you. The monarch replied and did not pay any attention to them. Try this. Xianyuanmos put something in her bowl. It's best to eat it while it's hot. Okay, I ate this yesterday. It's not bad. You should try it. She picked up something and put it in his bowl. At the main seat, although the monarch was eating, he was watching the 2 of them from the corner of his eye. He saw them helping each other with food from time to time. They did not speak much, but the trust and warmth between the 2 of them made the monarch's eyes burn. Narrowing his eyes slightly, he took a sip of the tea beside him to hide the strange expression on his face. However, at this moment, after Xianyuanmos scooped a bowl of soup for Fengzhou, she gestured to the monarch who was drinking tea. Seeing this, Xianyuanmos pursed his lips and his gaze darkened. He did not move for a long time. Seeing the woman beside him tugging at his sleeve and gesturing to him from time to time, he scooped another bowl and placed it in front of him. His voice was cold and hard as he said, "Don't drink tea while eating. Drink soup." The monarch was slightly taken aback. He lifted his eyes to look at the man and saw that he was already eating. If not for the piping hot soup in front of him, the monarch would have thought that he was hallucinating. Fengzhou smiled at the monarch. He did not say much and continued eating. After the monarch recovered from his shock, he put down the teacup in his hand and picked up the bowl of piping hot soup. He only felt numb in his heart and it was sour and astringent. It was as if something was stuck in his throat and he could not speak. During the meal, the atmosphere at the table was unusually quiet. Occasionally, only Fengzhou's laughter could be heard. Xianyuanmos's brief replies and the monarch, who was sitting at the main seat, stole glances from time to time. This meal took a full 2 hours before they finished eating. It was only when the monarch stood up and left without a word that Fengzhou put down his chopsticks. He rubbed his round belly and laughed happily. "I'm so full." Chapter 1304. When the 2 of them walked out together, Ying Yi and Hui Lang, who were waiting outside, silently followed them. Seeing them walk towards the palace gates, she couldn't help but ask, "Don't we need to say goodbye to the monarch?" "What's there to say?" "There's no need." As Xianyuanmos spoke, he didn't let go of her hand. However, after walking a distance away, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. "What's wrong?" She raised her head and asked, looking at him in surprise. "Did he change his mind?" Xianyuanmos stared at her and asked, "Where's your veil?" Fengzhou was stunned, then he chuckled. He took out the veil and waved it in his hand. "It's here." He took it and put it on for her. "There are too many people outside, it's better to put it on." "All right, I'll listen to you," she said with a smile, holding his hand as they walked towards the palace gates. They were leaving the palace. In her eyes, his father was just a father who didn't know how to express his feelings for his son. She thought that something must have happened between them, otherwise their relationship wouldn't be so stiff. However, they were father and son. As long as it wasn't a big mistake, there would be a day when the knot in their hearts would be untied. "Your Highness, Miss Feng, please wait a moment." Not far behind them, a hurried voice sounded. The two of them stopped and turned around, seeing the palace servant that Feng Zhou was familiar with quickly running over. Gasping for breath, he bowed and presented a box with both hands. "Miss Feng, this is for you from the monarch." Feng Zhou was slightly stunned. He glanced at Xianyuan Mose, then took the box and opened it to see a blood jade. What was different from normal blood jade was that this blood jade was filled with light, as if the light inside was about to overflow. It was very dazzling. Xianyuan Mose took a look and his eyes moved slightly. He said to Feng Zhou, "Take it." Hearing him say take it, she put it away and said to the palace servant, "Thank the monarch for us." "Yes." The eunuch replied with a smile before turning to leave. It was not until they got into the carriage that Feng Zhou took out the blood jade and looked at it again and again. "This blood jade is beautiful, but what's inside? It feels like it can move." He took the blood jade from her hand and used his fingertip to force a drop of her blood into the blood jade to recognize it as its master. He then tied it to her waist and said, "Wear this blood jade. Other than being able to help with your cultivation, it can also automatically protect its master." Automatically protecting its master. She was slightly surprised. "Is this a magic treasure? A rare magical treasure?" Hearing this, she blinked and smiled. "Your imperial father is quite generous." She didn't have anything to give him. A single blood jade was enough to buy you over. He raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. "Hee, you can't say that." She held his arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. She smiled and narrowed her eyes, saying, "It should be said that I've subdued your imperial father." In response, Xianyuan Mose did not say anything and only reached out to hug her tightly. When the two of them returned to the Fu, the people in the Fu saw their master walking in with a veiled woman in red. They couldn't help but sneak a peek. In the past 2 days, they had been guessing her identity. The people in the Fu had been discussing her in private and felt that it was very novel. Chapter 1305. In the following days, the two of them were practically glued to each other the entire day. When Xianyuan Mose was handling matters, Feng Zhou would be at his side tidying up his things, reading beside him, or lying on the soft couch to sleep. The days were warm and peaceful. In the residence, everyone was almost certain that this woman in red would be the mistress of the residence. Until, 2 months later, one day. "Master, Uncle Han is back. He's waiting for you in the study." Ing Yi came in to report, and at the same time glanced at Feng Zhou discreetly. Xianyuan Mose responded, and said to Feng Zhou, "I'll be back soon." Feng Zhou was lying on the soft couch reading a book and eating grapes that Xianyuan Mose had peeled. When she heard Xianyuan Mose's words, she responded and continued flipping through the pages of the book. Ing Yi left with Xianyuan Mose, while Hui Lang stayed behind. Looking at Feng Zhou who was leisurely reading, he couldn't help but step forward. Master was practically brought up by Uncle Han. "Oh." She raised her head and glanced at Hui Lang. "This Uncle Han is very special. Even Master calls him Uncle Han." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "I've been in the residence for more than 2 months, why haven't I seen him yet?" "Uncle Han is in charge of the Black Dungeon. That's the place where mistakes are punished and secret guards are trained. He usually doesn't leave the Black Dungeon unless there's something important. This time, he probably heard the news that the ghost doctor had come to the residence, so he came over." Hearing this, Feng Zhou's eyes flashed. Looking at Hui Lang who was slightly hesitant to speak, her heart trembled slightly, but she didn't care and continued flipping through the book. However, this time, she couldn't really focus on the book. Hui Lang opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but didn't know what to say. In the end, he just closed his mouth. On the other side, in the study. Uncle Han, why are you back? Did something happen over there? After Xianyuanmo's entered the study, he saw the middle-aged man sitting at the table and asked. Ah, Zay, I heard that a woman of unknown origin came to the manor. Is there such a thing? The middle-aged man asked. He didn't address Xianyuanmo's as master or young master. Instead, he addressed him by his name as an elder would address a junior. Uncle Han, her name is Fingzhou. She's not a woman of unknown origin. He sat down at the table and said in a low voice, I've known her for a few years. She's the woman I love and will be the mistress of the house in the future. I don't want Uncle Han to have any prejudice against her. Uncle Han's face darkened. Ah, Zay, you've never had a woman by your side since you were young. You don't know much about women. Women are all vain. They only care about your status and everything you have. They don't really love you. That's enough, Uncle Han. Xianyuanmo stood up with a dark face. Thank you for your concern, Uncle Han. If there's nothing else, you should return to the Black Dungeon as soon as possible. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and strode out. Uncle Han, who was sitting in the study, clenched his fists as he watched Xianyuanmo leave in a huff. It was as if there was a ball of fire burning in his heart. His gaze darkened and a ruthless aura emanated from his body, making him look extremely terrifying. In the dark, the shadow guards didn't dare to breathe loudly when they saw this. After a while, he stood up and left the study. Only then did the shadow guards let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1306. However, even though Master regarded Uncle Han as an elder, he would not listen to Uncle Han on this kind of matter. Moreover, in their opinion, Master and Fingzhou were a perfect match. Master, who was usually cold and emotionless, would only show his gentle side in front of Fingzhou. They had never seen this side of him before. They had been by Master's side for so long, but they rarely saw him like this. When they returned to the courtyard, Xianyuanmo saw that the person in the courtyard seemed to be asleep with a book covering her face. He walked forward and sat down beside her. He glanced at Hui Lang. Why didn't you get a blanket to cover her? Hui Lang scratched his head. This subordinate didn't think of it just now. How about I go get it now? As he spoke, he quickly walked into the room and took out a blanket to hand to Master. Just as Xianyuanmo was about to cover her with the blanket, he saw that the book covering her face was removed, revealing a smiling face. I'm not sleeping. Looking at that smiling face, the anger in his heart dissipated. The corner of his mouth raised slightly. If you're tired, go back to the room and sleep. It's easy to catch a cold if you sleep here. Then you'll carry me in. She stretched out her hands, directly asking him to carry her. Okay, he replied. He got up and bent down to pick her up. Holding her in his arms, he walked into the room. Seeing this, Grey Wolf let out a sigh of relief and grinned. He turned around and saw a figure standing not far away, looking at this scene with a gloomy face. The smile on Grey Wolf's face froze, and he glanced at Yi, who was beside him. Uncle Han. Why did he come here? Did he want to see the ghost doctor? You too, come here. The middle-aged man standing outside the courtyard called out in a deep voice. Yi and Hui Lang paused for a moment, then walked out. Greetings, Uncle Han. The two of them bowed and said. That woman has been living here all this time. Yi pursed his lips and did not speak. Hui Lang smiled awkwardly. Uncle Han, her name is Fingzhou. She. Just a shameless woman. You don't have to tell me her name. He snorted coldly. When he thought of the scene he just saw, his gaze became even more malicious. Uncle Han, that's the woman Master likes. I think Uncle Han shouldn't be too presumptuous. Otherwise, if Master hears it, he won't like it. Ing Yi said coldly. He felt that Uncle Han was meddling too much. How dare you? Suddenly, Ing Yi's blood started to boil. He let out a muffled groan and staggered. A mouthful of blood came out from the corner of his mouth. Uncle Han, what are you doing? Hui Lang was shocked and quickly supported Ing Yi while glaring at him. What are you doing? Is this how you do things when you follow Master? You let some random woman get close to him. Do you know your sins? He shouted in a deep voice. His voice was like thunder in the hearts of the two men. They didn't even have a chance to speak because the other party was too strong. Strong enough to suppress them. In the courtyard, Xianyuan Mo's face darkened when he heard the commotion outside. Fengjiu raised an eyebrow and glanced outside. She had just laid down on the bed. She hadn't even covered herself with the quilt and there was already a commotion outside. I'll go out and take a look. You sleep. He pulled up the quilt and covered her with it, then turned and walked out. Chapter 1307. Outside, Uncle Han, who was scolding the two, saw the door of the courtyard open. His face darkened as he looked over. His gaze went past Xianyuan Mo's and landed on Fengjiu, who was dressed in red. Looking at the woman's beautiful face, he was even more certain that she was a vixen. When Fengjiu walked out, she sensed a sharp and hostile gaze staring at her and sizing her up. She raised her eyes and looked over, her gaze landing on the middle-aged man outside the courtyard. The man was dressed in black clothes, had a robust figure, and a piercingly cold aura. His entire body emanated a powerful and sharp pressure. As for his face, it was not ordinary, but it was not outstanding either. However, he had a dignified face, but at this moment, he looked a little sinister and gave people a bad feeling. Was this the Uncle Han that Hui Lang mentioned? Even if Xianyuan Mo's was brought up by him, he was too meddlesome. He even wanted to meddle with the woman by his side. This desire to control, really opened her eyes. Even the monarch of the palace, Xianyuan Mo's father, was not as meddlesome as him. Her first impression of this Uncle Han was very bad, and she was very displeased. If it were a relative, it would be understandable. However, he was neither a relative nor a friend. How could he meddle in her master's affairs just because of a bit of friendship? She did not know why Xianyuan Mo's kept such a person and let him manage his black prison. However, it was obvious that this person did not know that he had crossed the line. What happened? Xianyuan Mo's asked in a low voice. His gaze was fixed on Hui Lang and Ing Yi. Especially when he saw Ing Yi's pale face and blood at the corner of his mouth, his face darkened. Without waiting for Ing Yi and Hui Lang to speak, Uncle Han asked first, "Is this the Fengjiu you were talking about?" He stared at Fengjiu with a sharp and sinister gaze. She is really capable. Uncle Han. Xianyuan Mo's looked at him and frowned. I told you to stay out of this. Zay, this demoness must know some kind of seduction technique. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to charm you like this. You can't keep such a person by your side. If you really want a woman, Uncle Han can help you find one. There are many who are prettier than her. Hearing this, Fengjiu burst out laughing. She slowly stepped forward and came to Xianyuan Mo's side. She held his arm with both hands and leaned against him. Her beautiful face bloomed with an enchanting smile. Mose, who is this old man? Hearing this, Hui Lang's Ing Yi couldn't help but twitch the corners of their mouths. They glanced at Uncle Han, whose face was ashen, and tactfully retreated to the side. Old man, only the ghost doctor would dare to tease people like this. But then again, with the ghost doctor's personality, it would be strange if she still respectfully called out to Uncle Han after Uncle Han insulted her time and time again. His name is Han Rong. We all call him Uncle Han. Xianyuan Mose said simply. Oh. His surname is Han. I thought his surname was Xianyuan. She said carelessly. She glanced at the middle-aged man who was clenching his fists in anger. Since he's an outsider, then he's naturally not your relative. If he's not your relative, then he's a servant. How can a servant care about your business? You impudent. Han Rong shouted angrily. But who knew that you're the impudent one? Chapter 1308. She let go of Xianyuan Mose's arm and stepped forward, fearlessly standing in front of Han Rong. Her eyes were as cold as frost, and with a frightening aura, she berated, "You're just a servant. Who gave you the right to be so presumptuous in front of your master? You're just an outsider. What right do you have to speak here?" Han Rong was so angry that his face was ashen. His chest heaved up and down violently, and his entire body was filled with hostility. He looked like he couldn't wait to kill Fingzhou. There was no doubt that if Xianyuan Mose wasn't standing there, he would have attacked already. Fingzhou sneered, "I'm just an outsider. How can I be more than a servant like you? I watched Ah Zhe grow up." He angrily clenched his fists and shouted. "So what if you watched him grow up? Did you give birth to him? Or did you raise him? Watched him grow up? Can you not differentiate between seniority and inferiority just because you watched him grow up? Can't differentiate between master and servant? Or are you trying to force me to repay your kindness?" She stepped closer and closer, her words aggressive. Han Rong's face turned from green to black, and then to red. She opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. She could only stare at Fingzhou with a pair of angry eyes, as if she wanted to drink her blood and eat her flesh. Xianyuan Mose, who originally didn't look very good, heard Fingzhou's words, and his face softened. His eyes flashed with a trace of a smile and doting. He didn't say anything, and let her handle it. In the future, she would be the mistress of this house. Although because of her relationship with him, the people in the house would acknowledge her, but it was hard to say if they would really obey her. She must have the ability and courage to handle things. Originally, he was thinking of how to find an opportunity for her. Now that Han Rong had personally delivered herself to his door, who else was more suitable than him to be the one to punish the chicken to warn the monkey? Using Han Rong, who was in charge of the Black Prison, as an example, who in this house would dare to not obey her? Ah Zhe, you're just going to let this demoness humiliate Uncle Han like this? He couldn't take it anymore and looked at the indifferent Xianyuan Mose. What I see is only you humiliating her, not the other way around. Xianyuan Mose's eyes darkened. He glanced at him expressionlessly and coldly said, "Perhaps you should pay more attention to the rules of the Fu." Han Rong's heart sank when she heard him refer to himself as this lord. She knew that he wouldn't listen to anything she said now. If she mentioned it again, it would only make things more troublesome. At that moment, he took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He tried his best to make himself look as calm as possible. Then, he said, "I understand. I'll take my leave first." As he said that, he cupped his hands and bowed. Without waiting for them to say anything, he turned around and left. Xianyuan Mose stared at his back and frowned. No one knew what he was thinking. Fingzhou raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's it. She thought that he wouldn't be able to control himself and would make a move. It seemed that this person's endurance was really not ordinary. He could even suppress this kind of thing. Thinking about it from another angle, a strong person who was originally respected in this house could only suppress his anger and leave after being suddenly admonished. How much endurance did he have to be able to do that? Moreover, the person who admonished him was her. Even if Xianyuanmo said that she would be the mistress of this house, she wouldn't be the mistress of this house until she married him. However, he endured her admonishment and left. With this kind of endurance, how could anyone look down on him? What are you thinking about? Chapter 1309. I'm thinking, why did you keep such a person by your side? Why did you entrust him with such an important task? Based on his character, this was not right. Hearing this, Xianyuanmo's expression changed slightly. He looked in the direction that Han Rong left and said, he was never like this before. On the side, Grey Wolf supported Ying Yi and stepped forward, quickly saying, yes, he really wasn't like this in the past. In the past, he was wholeheartedly thinking about Master and the house. He never did anything out of line. Today, he went too far, it really surprised people. Feng Zhou was deep in thought. Never like this before. Just because of her. Could it be that she really had a bad first impression of him, so she misunderstood that he was a scheming person? Hui Lang, helping Yi to get treated. Xianyuanmo said. Yes. After replying, he left with Ying Yi first. Xianyuanmo held her hand and said, there are many people in the manor, and many of them are stronger than you. They will acknowledge you because of your relationship with me, but whether they accept you or not, it's up to you to decide in the future. Speaking of this, he smiled and said, you handled today's matter well. You should be ruthless and don't have any scruples. Hearing this, she sighed and frowned with a look of disdain. I haven't married you and you're already so troublesome. I have to reconsider whether I want to marry you or not. Saying this, she pulled her hand back and turned to walk into the courtyard. Xianyuanmo was startled and stunned for a moment. He chased after her anxiously, you promised me, you can't go back on your words. She looked at the sky and thought for a moment. Then, she pursed her lips and refused to admit it, did I? When did I promise you? Why don't I remember? You must have remembered wrongly. Feng Zhou. I'm here. She smiled slyly, you know that I hate troublesome matters. Moreover, I'm not as strong as the people in your manor. If someone bullies me in the future, I won't be able to beat them. So, after thinking about it, I'll forget about it. I'll protect you with me here. He said seriously, moreover, my people won't offend their superiors. Hearing this, she waved her index finger in front of him, don't say it's so early, it's hard to say. Moreover, I heard that men are different before and after marriage. I'm starting to worry. I'm only 17 or 18 years old, in the prime of my youth. There's still a lot of time, I can't get married so easily. You're not young anymore. As he spoke, he glanced at her chest. The place that should be big has also grown. Hearing this, Feng Zhou rolled her eyes and snorted, where are you looking at? What are you looking at? Xiao Zhou, how about this? Let's pick an auspicious day and I'll send the betrothal gifts first. How about it? Nothing much, I have to reconsider. What's more, there's still a 10-year agreement between you and me. She snorted. Looking at his anxious expression, she found it somewhat funny. Thinking about it, I've been here for a few months. I'll probably be leaving in a few days. She looked at him and said, after I leave, you don't have to specifically ask about me. When it's time to appear, I'll appear. Hearing this, his brows furrowed, are you planning to hide? Actually, if you have anything to do, you can tell me. I'll help you solve it. Chapter 1310. A woman who relies on a man too much will become nothing in the end. She doesn't like to rely on others. She wants to be able to make her own decisions and deal with her own problems. Even if she is in the 8 great empires, she hopes that one day, her power will spread to this side. Her people will spread to every corner of the 8 great empires. She only needs to give the order and all the heroes will rush over. Thinking of this, her eyes flashed. She feels that this will come true. She wants to have this kind of power, not to dominate the world or anything. She just wants to have enough power to protect people who want to hurt her country and her family. A man wants to become strong and dominate the world to become a Jizun cultivator. A woman wants to become strong and become a Jizun cultivator. She wants to become strong and become a Jizun cultivator. She wants to have great power, but it is only to have the power to protect the people she wants to protect. To a woman, dominating the world is not very attractive. Even for her, her life goal is not that. Therefore, when she heard Imo-chan say that she will become the ruler of the world, she only laughed it off. That is impossible, because she only wants to live a simple life. She wants to have enough power to protect the people she wants to protect. She wants to live with the people she likes, have a few children, watch the children grow up, watch the clouds move by, watch the sunset and the rosy clouds rise and fall together. Xianyuanmo saw the determination in her eyes and didn't say anything more. He only said helplessly, "All right, if there is anything you can't solve, you can help me. Also, when you leave this place, where are you going?" She should at least let him know, right? Otherwise, how am I going to find her? Hearing this, she looked up at him and laughed softly. "I'm not telling you." With that, the red figure quickly ran away. Looking at her figure running into the room, he shook his head and sighed. It is said that only women and villains are difficult to deal with. He finally experienced this today. Especially, from the first time he met her, he knew that this woman was as cunning as a fox. Her temperament was even better than most women. Even he had suffered many losses at her hands. However, this time, she seemed to be more well-behaved. She only stayed by his side all day and didn't think of any other tricks. He thought that she had changed. So she was waiting for him here. On the other side, Han Rong, who had returned to her room, was so angry that she smashed the table. When she thought of the previous scene, she felt a fire burning in her heart. The fire was getting bigger and bigger, and she could not suppress her anger. Demonis. She wanted to be the mistress of the mansion. "I, Han Rong, will not let you do as you wish." He clenched his fists, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. The news of Fingzhou scolding Han Rong spread quickly in the mansion. Some people were shocked. After all, Han Rong's status in the mansion was not low. Even the master usually called him Uncle Han. Fingzhou dared to scold him in front of the master? More importantly, master didn't stop him. For a moment, they thought in their hearts and couldn't help but re-evaluate Fingzhou's position in their master's heart and in the manor. The days seemed to pass peacefully as usual. However, a few days later, when Han Rong brought 4 beautiful and voluptuous women to the main courtyard, many people were slightly surprised. Chapter 13:11. Ing Yi and Hui Lang, who were standing guard outside the main courtyard, saw him come in with 4 women. They couldn't help but look at each other. One of them blocked the entrance while the other went in to report. Because the door wasn't closed, Hui Lang went in directly. He poked his head inside, but didn't see Fingzhou's figure. He hurriedly lowered his voice and said, "Master, Uncle Han brought 4 women here. They're all like this." He even twisted his body and drew a line in front of his chest with his hands, showing off their exquisite and voluptuous figures. Xianyuanmo's face darkened. He glanced at him and then looked at Fingzhou, who appeared behind Hui Lang. Seeing that his master's gaze was looking behind him, Grey Wolf felt a chill run down his spine and hurriedly turned around. When he saw the red figure standing there, he couldn't help but smile in embarrassment. Ghost doctor. Hui Lang, you're quite good at drawing. Your waist is also quite soft. I didn't know you had such potential. Fengjiu said with a smile that wasn't a smile. Actually I just came in to report. That, I'll leave first. He smiled stiffly and left. Beauties, there are 4 of them, and they're all voluptuous. Aren't you going to take a look? She glanced at the man sitting at the table. I'll just send them away. He didn't want to go out at all. He knew that this woman's jealousy was very strong. If he really dared to leave this woman by his side, she could pack up and leave at any time. He didn't dare to take this risk. He reached out to pull her, but saw that she avoided him. She glanced outside and said, "How can that be? Delicate and voluptuous beauties. Even if you don't want to take a look, I want to take a look. What's more, it's your Uncle Han's good intentions, right?" As soon as she finished speaking, she really walked out. Seeing this, he helplessly sighed and could only follow. "Uncle Han, without Master's permission, you can't enter. You should know." Yi's face was cold and expressionless as he spoke. He blocked the entrance to the courtyard, not allowing him to take a step forward. Han Rong's face was gloomy. She glanced at Yi and didn't say anything, because the people in the room had already come out. "What are you doing?" Xianyuan Mo's voice was low and cold. Zay, Uncle Han knows that he went overboard that day, so he's here today to apologize to Miss Feng. He said to Xianyuan Mo's, then looked at Fengjiu. His eyes moved slightly as he said, "Miss Feng, this Han has specially come today to apologize. I know that Miss Feng has been in the manor for so long and doesn't even have a servant girl to serve you, so I specially picked a few people to serve Miss Feng." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and shouted at the women beside him, "Why aren't you coming forward to greet Miss Feng?" This servant greets Miss Feng. The 4 of them curtsied and bowed. Their voices were gentle and flirtatious. When they bent over, their breasts were faintly discernible. When they raised their eyes again, their eyes were like limpid autumn water, charming like silk. It was very moving. Hui Lang was speechless. It couldn't be, right? These 4 delicate and voluptuous beauties were prepared for the ghost doctor? If they were given to the ghost doctor, a woman like her wouldn't be able to enjoy them. He originally thought that they were here to give to Master. But it was also true. This Han Rong knew that Master wouldn't accept them, so he said that he was here to apologize. However, this apology was fake, and the real purpose was to give them away, right? Chapter 13:12. Xianyuan Mo's furrowed his brows and looked at Fengjiu. When he saw her glowing eyes staring at the 4 women, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch, and he looked away, speechless. "Are you really giving me these plump beauties?" She stepped forward and touched one of the hands. "They're so smooth. What are you applying?" The beauty whose hand was touched by her stiffened and didn't dare to withdraw her hand. She could only brace herself and say softly, "Miss Feng, this servant uses pearl cream on my hands." "Oh, so you use pearls. No wonder they're so smooth." She nodded and let go of the woman's hand. She lifted the woman's chin and said, "Their looks are quite pleasing to the eye. Their skin is so white. I'm envious." Yi and Hui Lang lowered their heads and hid the smile in their eyes. Han Rong frowned slightly and was a little surprised. He thought she would be angry, but who knew she would flirt with the women in front of them? Was this demoness really a woman? "Are you really giving these beauties to me?" Fengjiu turned around and asked Han Rong. "Take them back. They're an eyesore." Before Han Rong could say anything, Xianyuan Mo's couldn't take it anymore. His woman didn't flirt with him and went to flirt with the other women. If they really stayed, what would happen in the future? Seeing this, Han Rong smiled. "Ah, say, Miss Feng also needs someone to take care of her." He looked at Feng Zhou. "Are you satisfied with these people?" "Satisfied, of course I'm satisfied. But since you're giving them to me, then they're my people, right? What if I accidentally kill them? You won't make trouble for me, right?" She smiled innocently and looked at Han Rong. Hearing this, Han Rong's heart moved and he looked at her. "Haha, of course not. Since I'm giving them to Miss Feng, they're naturally Miss Feng's people. Whether they live or die has nothing to do with me. But I think, since I'm giving them to Miss Feng as an apology, Miss Feng won't let them die so easily." "Of course," as she replied with a smile. If these people dared to have any thoughts that they shouldn't have, she wouldn't let them die. At most, she would make them wish they were dead. "Since that's the case, I'll take my leave first." As he spoke, he glanced at Xianyuan Mose before turning to leave with a smile. "Why did you keep them here?" Xianyuan Mose asked. She could have rejected him, but she chose to let him stay. She glanced at him, her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled and said, "Of course. Otherwise, the days would be too boring, wouldn't they?" As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at the four beauties in front of her and asked, "What are your names?" However, just as they were about to say their names, Feng Zhou waved his hand and said, "Let's call the four of you Spring, Summer, Autumn, and Winter. Don't come to the main courtyard unless I tell you otherwise." "Yes." The four of them replied, not daring to refute. "Hui Lang, if there's anything you need them to do, I'll leave it to you," she said as she looked at Hui Lang. "Ah. Me?" He paused and looked at the four women. He scratched his head and thought for a moment before saying, "All right then. You guys go and fetch water first. Fill up all the water tanks in the backyard." "Yes." The four of them replied and bowed before heading to the back. Chapter 13:13. I remember that the water in the back courtyard is from the spring water in the back mountain. Furthermore, the bucket seems to have a sharp bottom. Feng Zhou raised an eyebrow at Hui Lang. "Heh, that's right. It's the spring water from the back mountain. It'll probably take a full day to carry the water. Ghost Doctor, I'm helping you send them away, so that they won't be an eyesore in front of you and Master." She chuckled. "How can they be an eyesore? Those four beauties with voluptuous figures swaying in front of my eyes like delicate flowers are a feast for the eyes. But Master thinks that they're an eyesore. Master only has eyes for you. With you around, no matter how beautiful the women are, they won't be able to enter Master's eyes," he said fawningly. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose curled his lips and glanced at Hui Lang before reaching out to hug Feng Zhou. "Do you want to go out for a walk today? I'll accompany you." "No, I plan to stay here and enjoy the carefree days of being waited upon." She turned and walked inside, lying down on the soft couch. She said to Hui Lang, "Hui Lang, let two people carry the water. Call two more back to massage my feet and serve me closely." Hearing this, Hui Lang glanced at Master and said, "Okay." He rushed to the back courtyard and called the two women back. "Where did Han Rong call you from?" Feng Zhou rested her head on her hands and looked at the two women kneeling to massage her legs. Replying to young miss, "We were transferred out from the beauty pavilion." The two of them replied in unison. "Oh. There's a beauty pavilion here." She glanced at Xianyuan Mose and asked with a faint smile, "You've never been there before?" "No." Xianyuan Mose said. Seeing her squinting comfortably and being served by two women, he said, "I'll go to the study to take care of some matters. I'll be back later." Seeing him leave, Feng Zhou raised his eyebrows and glanced at Hui Lang. "Is your master running away?" "Huh, how could that be?" Hui Lang smiled embarrassedly and retreated outside. Fengjiu snorted and stopped talking. He closed his eyes and went to sleep. At this time, when the two women saw that she had fallen asleep, they quietly sized her up. Today, when they came over, they all lowered their heads and did not dare to look at her directly. Now that they saw her, they could not help but be surprised by her beauty. Even among the hundreds of beauties in the beauty pavilion, none of them could compare to her. It was no wonder that the Yamo lords took a liking to her. They had heard that their master, who had never been close to women, doted on a red-clothed woman very much and treated her as a treasure in his palm. Seeing her today, they couldn't help but envy and yearn for her. If they could also obtain master's pity, how good would that be? Thinking of this and what Han Rong said, the two women looked at each other and couldn't help but lower their gazes and gently massage her legs. At night, the sky was filled with stars and the courtyard was quiet. After returning to the main courtyard to have dinner with Fengjiu, Xian Yuanmo's returned to the study to take care of unfinished business. He was busy until late at night. Fengjiu was already lying on the bed resting. At this time, a woman came to the study with ginseng tea. However, before she could enter, she was stopped by Ying Yi. "Go back." Ying Yi lowered his voice and said coldly. Chapter 13-14. Hearing this, Ying Yi glanced at the woman and guessed Fengjiu's intention. Thus, he pushed open the door and said, "Go in." "Thank you, guarding." The woman was delighted. She gently bowed and walked inside with the ginseng tea. After the woman entered, Ying Yi glanced at the roof and stood guard outside the door as if he didn't know anything. At this time, on the roof of the study, a red figure was squatting there, looking down with interest through the small skylight. Compared to her leisure, Xian Yuanmo's face was dark. Thinking of what the woman who came in through the window said to him, he felt a headache coming on. What did she say? She wanted him to cooperate with her. She wanted to see if she could make a move on those women, so as not to hurt the innocent. He didn't know if he should be happy that she trusted him or angry that she used him to test those women. "Master, this servant has brought the ginseng tea." A coquettish voice rang out, causing Fengjiu, who was on the roof, to tremble and her eyes to shine. This voice was much more coquettish than talking to her. Did she really want her man? Ha ha ha, she had guts. Then don't blame her for being impolite. She glanced downstairs and saw Xian Yuanmo sitting upright and closing the things on the table. When she saw the unconcealable joy on the woman's face, she couldn't help but chuckle softly. When the sound reached the study downstairs, the woman was shocked and her face instantly paled. She hurriedly looked up and saw the red figure sitting by the little skylight above. "Ah!" She cried out in alarm and her legs went soft. She was about to throw herself at Xian Yuanmo's when she was pushed away by a force and flew out of the study. "The night is good. Handsome man, do you want to come up and admire the moon?" She sat cross-legged and touched her chin with one hand. She looked down at Xian Yuanmo's with a smile. "Actually, I won't be jealous if you take advantage of that woman. Just don't let others take advantage of you." Hearing the first sentence, Xian Yuanmo's lips revealed a smile. He thought that this little woman finally understood and knew to invite him to admire the moon. Who knew that the next sentence would directly cut off his thoughts? Sure enough, she was still so unreliable. He walked out of the study with his hands behind his back and glanced at the woman who had fainted from fright. He had Ying Yi send someone to take her away. Then he tiptoed and jumped onto the roof of the study and slowly walked towards the red figure. Fengjiu blinked her eyes and admired the black figure walking under the moonlight. Looking at the godlike handsome figure exuding the charm of a mature man, she couldn't help but narrow her eyes. She felt that her taste in men was really good. Such an outstanding man, she directly hugged his thigh. As for the crafty and quick-witted Fengzhou, she sat leisurely on the roof. She rested her chin on her hand and looked at him with a smile. In Xianyuan Mo's eyes, she was like a seductive spirit under the night sky, seductive and captivating. Handsome man, smile. The teasing words came with a smile, breaking the romantic and mysterious atmosphere. Xianyuan Mo, who heard her words, couldn't help but smile helplessly. Such a good atmosphere, can't you say something normal? Chapter 13-15. For example, you can express your love for me to me. He revealed a smile and sat down beside her. He reached out his hand and naturally pulled her into his embrace. Who knew that he would be greeted by her elbow? N. He groaned, "You're murdering your own husband." "Aw. Does it hurt?" "I'm sorry, I definitely didn't do it on purpose." "I'll help you rub it," she said with a smile and reached out her hand to rub his chest. A pair of small hands rubbed his chest. Xianyuan Mo only felt his breathing quicken and a fire in his body. He immediately grabbed her hand and gritted his teeth as he said, "Don't light the fire." "Light the fire?" "No. I didn't light the fire." She glanced at him and saw that his face was a bit uncomfortable and his body was slightly stiff. She couldn't help but curiously blink her eyes. She looked up and down and was a bit stunned. "Your self-control is like this?" Xianyuan Mo only felt the fire in his body burning even more fiercely, especially when this woman actually glanced at his lower body in front of him. That gaze was like a fuse, making him almost unable to hold it in. However, a certain person didn't know it and actually continued to tease him. "Your body seems to be a bit stiff. Could it be that you're too tired? How about I help you massage your shoulders?" And, just like that, Fengzhou quickly stood up and excitedly came to his side to massage his shoulders. "Relax, relax, don't always tense your body." When he heard that, Xianyuan Mo let her be. After taking a deep breath, he calmed the fire in his body and gradually relaxed his body. He felt that pair of small hands pressing on his shoulders. Time and time again, the strength was neither light nor heavy. It was gentle and slow, and it was very comfortable. "Yes, just like that. Relax is right." She smiled and narrowed her eyes, a trace of slyness flashing through her eyes. She first loosened his shoulders and then massaged his temples. It was only because of her that he could be so assured to give himself to her and let her massage him at will. If it was anyone else, he would never give his back to someone he didn't trust, let alone a fatal head. "How is it? Is it comfortable?" she asked with a smile. "Yes, it's comfortable." Not only was it comfortable, but he also felt that all his fatigue had disappeared. The night breeze was cool, and he had the company of someone he cared about. She was also helping him massage. This feeling made him feel comfortable both physically and mentally. "That's right. This is a special finger technique. There are acupuncture points. I can't just press them randomly." She chuckled and pressed from his head up to his neck. She pressed a little, all the way down to his back and to his waist. She only felt that when her hand pressed down on his waist, his body stiffened. His originally half-closed eyes also opened, and a ball of fire leaped up in his eyes once again. "You have to massage your waist if you sit for too long. Otherwise, it will be sore in the future." As soon as she finished speaking, he hugged her from behind and carried her to the front. She lay on his lap. She blinked and looked at him. She noticed that his gaze was getting darker and darker. He stared intently at her red lips. His throat moved up and down, and his face gradually lowered. Seeing this, she reached out to hold his face and looked at him attentively and seriously. Under his expectant gaze, her red lips parted slightly, and her voice came out with a trace of a smile. Chapter 13:16. Xianyuan Mo's lips twitched when he heard those words that spoiled the mood. His entire body froze on the spot as he stared speechlessly at the silhouette that instantly leapt up from his lap, giggling as she quickly ran off. Seeing the red figure disappear into the night with a few leaps, only her clear and melodious laughter could be heard in the wind. He couldn't help but let out a heavy breath. This woman. She was the one who flirted, and she was the one who ruined the mood. What was he supposed to do with this annoying little vixen? He sat on the rooftop, enjoying the night breeze. Even the cool night breeze couldn't suppress the heat in his body. He was a man. If he was teased again and again, he would suffer internal injuries. On the other side, Fengjiu had already returned to her room in the courtyard. After closing the door and windows, she hid under the blanket and laughed. All right. She admitted that she had done it on purpose. She had only wanted to test his self-control. Who knew that he would have no self-control? When she thought of his expectant gaze and the way he froze in place, she couldn't help but laugh. As for Xianyuan Mo, who had returned to the courtyard, he glanced at her room and shook his head. He went into his room and ordered someone to prepare some water for him to soak in. The next day, the tranquility of the morning was shattered by a piercing scream. Ah! The scream traveled from the rear courtyard to the front of the main courtyard, startling everyone in the front and rear courtyard awake. Of course, there was one exception, Fengjiu, who was sleeping with a blanket over her head. She acted as if she hadn't heard the scream. She turned around and pulled the blanket over her head. She didn't even try to find out what was going on. She didn't need to be curious to know what was going on. After all, it was her doing. Of the 4 women, 2 were keeping watch in the outer room of Fengjiu's room. They were there to wait on Fengjiu to see if she needed water. As for the other 2, besides the one who had been brought back last night, the other was also in the rear courtyard. When the piercing scream pierced the sky, the 2 women in Fengjiu's room saw that Fengjiu wasn't moving. They walked out quietly and were about to go to the back to see what was going on when they saw Xia rushing over. Oh no, oh no, oh no. I don't know what happened to Dong Her. When she woke up this morning, she gasped for breath, her face full of shock. What happened to her? They knew. Last night, when Miss asked them who was going to deliver the ginseng soup to their master, they were hesitant. Dong Her was the only one who stepped forward. However, she was carried back, her injuries weren't serious, but they weren't light either. I've become fatter. Was, when she woke. When they heard this, Spring and Autumn were shocked. They looked at each other. Chun said, "Go and take a look. Miss hasn't woken up yet. It's better if I stay here." "All right, I'll be back soon," Xiao said. She followed Xia to the rear courtyard. As she walked, she was shocked. How could she gain weight overnight for no reason? Furthermore, she was in the residence. If that was true, then it could be. When she thought of this, she couldn't help but shiver. Chapter 13:17. The person crying on the bed lifted her head. Her face was so swollen that it looked like someone had blown air into it. The 2 of them gasped in shock as they covered their mouths and took a step back. I don't know what happened. I woke up like this in the morning. Dong cried on the bed as she pulled up her pants to cover her head. She was too ashamed to face anyone. After she calmed down, Chun-Er's gaze flickered. Don't cry. It's probably just a little swollen. It's fine as long as there's no other problem. When Miss wakes up, I'll tell her about your situation. The two of them comforted her. After a while, they left and went to the front. After speaking to Chiu for a while, the three of them looked at each other and found Hui Lang. Captain, Dong The two of them told Hui Lang about what happened in the backyard. Hui Lang's face twitched when he heard this. He said, "You can talk to Miss about this when she wakes up." With that, he flashed out. What a joke. It was obvious that the ghost doctor was behind this. Asking him to deal with it. Forget about it. When the three of them saw this, they didn't dare to say anything. They quietly guarded the room and waited for Fengzhou to wake up. Fengzhou finally woke up at about the end of the morning. After she washed up, she walked out of the room. The three of them looked at each other and tried to push each other to get the person beside them to speak. In the end, it was Chiu who carefully reported, "Miss, I don't know what happened to Dong She's gained 2 rounds of weight overnight." "Oh. Is that so?" "It's fine. I know medicine. I'll take a look at her later." As she spoke, she glanced at the other room in the courtyard. "Is the person over there not awake yet?" "He left early," Chun said. "Oh." Fengzhou nodded. "Then what are you waiting for? Did you forget that you're here to serve me? Go to the kitchen and see what's there. Bring some over for me." "Yes." The three of them hurriedly went to prepare the food for her. After Fengzhou ate her fill, Xianyuan Mo's didn't return. Therefore, she said, "Let's go. Let's go and see her." Thus, the three of them followed behind her and headed to the backyard with apprehension. Looking at the fat man, Fengzhou couldn't help but sigh. The effect of the medicine was really strong. She had only casually stuffed a strange pill into her mouth, but she had grown fat overnight. It was as if she had blown air into a rubber bowl. It was inconceivable. "How do you feel? Other than being fat, are there any other discomforts in your body?" She took out a small notebook and asked as she jotted it down. This was a book that recorded the effects of those strange pills. "No, young miss, please save me." Dong cried and begged. "It's fine. Wait a moment, I'll find a pill for you." Fengzhou waved his hand and took out a dark red pill. Dong hesitated as she looked at the dark red pill. She was a little uneasy as she looked at Fengzhou. I. She didn't dare to eat it. That pill didn't look like an ordinary pill. Would there be any problems if she ate it? However, just as she opened her mouth, a stream of air hit her and hit the acupuncture point on her chest. She cried out. At the same time, Fengzhou flicked the pill into her mouth. "You should be glad that you have the chance to taste my pill." She clapped her hands and looked at Dong who had swallowed the pill. "Wait a moment. Tell me if there are any symptoms." Chapter 13:18. Was it because they approached him with ulterior motives that they ended up as test subjects? No, that wasn't it. She didn't directly use the medicine on the 4 of them. She only used it after Dong gave them the ginseng soup. As they thought of this, the other 3 lowered their heads nervously. At this moment, Dong face turned pale as she thought of the same thing. She suddenly cried out in pain, and her entire body rolled on the ground as she spun around. Her painful cries continued to come out of her mouth. Her originally fat body was visibly slimming down at this moment. However, she was still slimming down. Her hands and feet were on the ground, and she was squatting like a wild beast. She cried out, and her fat body was actually squatting and jumping on the ground like an animal. Following this, her face started to change. She turned from a human to a cat and a tiger. The most unbelievable thing was that a strange tail grew out of her back. "Ah!" Chun, Xia, and Chiao were shocked by this scene. They covered their mouths and exclaimed as they retreated to one side. Oh. So that's a beast pill. Fengjiu looked at the tail that grew out of her body. He was very curious as to how this tail grew out. As she watched, she wrote down the changes that happened to Dong-er after she ate the beast pill. However, at this moment, Dong-er, who was almost like a wild beast, suddenly turned her head. Her bloodthirsty eyes stared at Fengjiu, who was sitting by the table and writing something. She suddenly leaped forward and pounced over. Her sharp claws, which had evolved from her mutation, were filled with a murderous aura as they clawed at Fengjiu's neck. Hiss! No! The three girls gasped. When they saw that she was attacking Fengjiu, they couldn't help but exclaim. They wanted to stop her, but because they had retreated to one side, and because Dong-er pounced forward at an extremely fast speed, they could only watch helplessly for a moment. However, when they saw that Fengjiu, who was writing something in the small book, lifted his eyes and swept his sleeve. A powerful air current that could be seen with the naked eye surged out and sent Dong-er flying. The three of them were even more shocked. The four of them had come from the beauty's house. Apart from their stunning looks, their abilities had already reached the Aurus Core stage. However, Dong-er, who was also a Aurus Core stage cultivator, was sent flying by the nonchalant Phoenix 9. Just how strong was she? Could it be that her strength was above the four of them? As they thought of this scene and looked at Dong-er, the three of them were shocked. If they did what haunt, would they end up like Dong-er, and become pill testers? Suddenly, they remembered what she and Han Rong had said. She said that she wouldn't let them die so easily. So, this was what she meant. Ao. Dong-er howled like a wild beast as she crashed to the ground. Just as she was about to get up and pounce forward again, she was suppressed by Fengjiu's aura, and was unable to get up. She walked forward and curiously felt her pulse. Then, she touched the strange tail that grew out of her back. As she touched the tail, she muttered to herself, "How did you grow a tail? It actually became a beast pill. That's weird." Just as she was thinking, she heard a thunderous roar from outside. "Witch! Come out! Is this your doing?" Chapter 13-19. Pft! A loud fart sound rang out, causing the hidden guards to be stunned. They looked strangely at Han Rong, who looked as if she wanted to kill someone. Fengjiu walked out from the backyard, followed by the three servant girls. Perhaps they were shocked by Dong-er's current appearance, but they all lowered their heads and respectfully followed 3 steps behind Fengjiu. They put away their flirtatious looks and replaced them with humility and respect. What's going on now? Fengjiu glanced at the furious and embarrassed Han Rong, wrinkling his brows and covering his nose. "You're too rude." Pfft! As soon as Fengjiu's voice fell, he heard Han Rong farting again. Instantly, his entire face turned red. He had never been so embarrassed before. He only felt that the prestige he had built up over the years had been destroyed because of this uncontrollable fart. "Witch! It's you, isn't it? When did you take the opportunity to attack me? How dare you?" His face was red as he glared at her. "Take out the antidote." Pfft! The frightening aura that came from the fierce and furious voice was destroyed by the sound of another fart. In the shadows, the hidden guards were stunned. In the courtyard, Fengjiu covered his nose and took a few steps back, staring coldly at him. "Witch? Ha! How dare you? Take out the antidote. Otherwise, I'll kill you." Just as his fierce voice sounded, the furious Han Rong sucked in his palm, and a wave of spiritual energy surged in his palm. In the next moment, his figure suddenly shot out, rushing towards Fengjiu. His speed and the ferocity of his attack made people's hearts jump. Whether it was Chun, Xia, or Chiu, or the hidden guards, they all saw that Han Rong wanted to take Fengzhou's life. The hidden guards saw that the situation was not good and quickly went to report to their masters. At this moment, Hui Lang, who had just returned from a walk, saw the two people fighting in front of the courtyard and quickly ran forward to shout. Han Rong! What are you doing? Is that someone you can touch? Stop it now! A dark light flashed in Han Rong's eyes. Since she had made a move, she had to kill this demoness before Auzé arrived. He would never let this demoness live by Auzé's side. Powerful airflow and pressure rushed out. Fengzhou, who was standing there, narrowed his eyes. Apart from the time in the Forest of Death when he felt the pressure and airflow stronger than the nascent soul stage, this was the second time he felt it. This was the level above the nascent soul realm, which was the true power of the fairy realm. The pressure and airflow were powerful enough to destroy everything, especially the wind blades that were flying towards her. They were so strong that her cheeks hurt. If she didn't have the protection of the ancient pressure, she wouldn't even be able to make a move against such an expert. With a move of her hand, the red silk around her waist wrapped around her hand. The red silk, which had been infused with spiritual energy, instantly turned from a belt into an offensive weapon. With a whoosh, it flew out and met the attack that was coming towards her. Above the red silk, there was a sharp aura of spiritual force that formed a blade of qi. The two figures moved together, and there was only the sound of qi being refracted. As the two of them exchanged blows, the powerful pressure caused the blood in the hearts of some of the shadow guards to churn. Blood flowed out from the corners of their mouths, not to mention the three maids. They wanted to go down and help. Chapter 13:20. Bang! After Han Rong dodged the attack of the red silk, he flipped his palm and condensed a sharp ice blade in his palm, attacking Fengzhou. When Fengzhou saw this, she immediately used her red silk to block it. The ice blade, which was as thick as a finger and had a sharp tip, landed on her red silk. When it was wrapped by her red silk, a flame surged and instantly melted the ice blade into water droplets that fell to the ground. Demoness! So you're practicing a fire-based technique. Seeing this, Han Rong's eyes flashed and he spoke in a gloomy voice. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of a fart was heard. This loud fart sound was extremely clear and strange. At the same time, it was like oil had been poured on Han Rong's heart, making him go crazy and want to kill Fengzhou. When Fengzhou changed from defense to offense, he gathered his hands together and the air was instantly controlled by him. It condensed and enveloped her. The pressure of a fairy realm expert in the air enveloped her, and the air current rose several feet high. It was as if empty tide was pressing down on her, and it was very aggressive. He wanted to take her life in one blow, so he poured all of his energy into this blow. In an instant, the sky changed color and the wind and clouds surged. In the sky, dark clouds filled the sky, and thunder rumbled. The sand on the ground was swept up. In a few breaths' time, in the dark clouds in the sky, a strong spiritual energy sucked up the sand on the ground and condensed it into a giant sand dragon. Vaguely, the giant sand dragon was like a whirlwind, and the dragon's tail was swaying below. It became bigger and stronger. Hiss. What's that? Heavens! Isn't that the Crown Prince's residence? Why is there a sand dragon stirring in the sky? Look! The sky above the residence has changed color. Is this a fight between two experts? Hiss! Who dares to fight in the Crown Prince's residence with no regard for their lives? They even condensed such a powerful sand dragon. Are they trying to kill someone? The scene in the sky above the Crown Prince's palace shocked everyone in the city. Some families even thought that something big had happened and sent people to investigate. Even in the palace, the monarch furrowed his brows when he heard about this. He ordered people to find out what was going on. And in the study of the manor, Xianyuan Mose had rushed to the main courtyard after hearing the report from the shadow guard. Halfway there, he was also shocked by the powerful unfrightening dragon of flying sand in the sky. Damned Han Rong. His face instantly turned ashen. His deep black eyes contained a monstrous fury as he flew towards the main courtyard. There was a trace of fear in his heart. If she was injured in his residence, how could he forgive himself? Han Rong. If he dared to hurt him, he would definitely not let him off. Feng Zhou's hands froze as he looked at the flying sand dragon stirring in the sky with some shock. It turned out that such a strong pressure and air flow was really frightening. It turned out that when a fairy realm expert attacked, if he wanted to kill someone, he would have such a strong explosive force. At this moment, she could even feel the aura of death rushing towards her. Even though her body was protected by the ancient pressure, the blood in her body was also stirred up, and her breathing was slightly chaotic. At this moment, she heard a furious voice coming from somewhere in the residence. Chapter 13:21. Feng Zhou was not the only one who heard Xianyuan Mose's words. Everyone in the mansion heard it as well. They were all shocked and looked towards the main yard of the inner yard. Master actually said that if Han Rong dared to hurt her, he would kill Han Rong. It had to be said that these words set off waves of shock in everyone's hearts. Han Rong's position in the mansion had always been very high. However, it was far from the position of the woman beside Master in Master's heart. It was also because of Xianyuan Mose's words that the other fairy realm experts who had been quietly observing in the shadows of the mansion finally flashed out. However, because of the pressure that enveloped Feng Zhou and the airflow that trapped her was too strong, they couldn't go to her side. They could only sternly shout at Han Rong from a few meters away from her. Han Rong. You have no respect for your seniors. Stop it now. Several voices contained a strong pressure that was visible to the naked eye. They attacked Han Rong like thunder, causing blood to flow from the corner of his mouth. However, his eyes were red, and there was madness, unwillingness, and hatred in his eyes. Xianyuan Mose's words that he would kill Han Rong if he dared to hurt Han Rong had angered him. Since Han Rong valued this demonic woman so much, he wanted her dead even more. He did not believe that Han Rong would really kill him after he killed her. Demonic woman. Today, I will definitely kill you. At this moment, Feng Zhou did not do anything else. She just stood there quietly, as if she was being suppressed by Han Rong's pressure. However, her expression was normal, and a dark light flashed in her eyes occasionally. It was as if she was waiting for something. When the few fairy realm powerhouses saw that Feng Zhou was still able to maintain a calm expression even when facing Han Rong's attack, they were secretly surprised. They couldn't help but think to themselves, could it be that he was scared silly? Otherwise, with her cultivation and strength, how could she not be scared? One had to know that even if Master wanted to protect her, it would be too late. Above her head, the huge sand dragon stirring the sky seemed as if it would rush down in the next moment and destroy and devour her. Feng Zhou glanced at the ferocious Han Rong, then looked up at the sand dragon in the sky and muttered, "It's about time." Han Rong. Stop. When they saw Han Rong's hands surging with spiritual energy, they couldn't help but be shocked. With the few of them here, if they still couldn't protect the person their master wanted to protect, then... Thinking of this, the four of them did not hesitate to attack. For powerful air currents suddenly shot out from their palms and collided with Han Rong, who had condensed a protective air current around her. Bang! Boom! Almost at the same time, the huge sand dragon in the sky exploded into scattered sand, and the spiritual energy instantly disappeared in midair. At the same time, the attacks of the four fairies below broke through Han Rong's protective air current with a bang and collided with Han Rong's body, sending her flying dozens of meters away. This sudden change stunned everyone, both in the open and in the dark. This was because they had all seen that the giant sand dragon in the sky had dispersed and disappeared, and it hadn't been destroyed because of the attacks of the four fairy realm experts below it. It was as if something had been cut off, and in an instant, it could not be controlled and shattered. The flying sand could not condense and scattered, and the spiritual energy dissipated because the supply was cut off. Chapter 13:22. Was it her? Her confidence and calmness, was it because she knew that Han Rong would not be able to hurt her in the end? Did she do it? How did she do it? When they attacked Han Rong, they also felt that the spiritual energy in his body seemed to have withered. He had lost all his spiritual energy in an instant. He had used up all his spiritual energy, so naturally, he could not control the sand dragon to deliver a fatal blow. But, how did she do it? How did she make Han Rong lose all his spiritual energy in an instant? They did not see her do it. Pooh. Han Rong spat out a mouthful of blood. He endured the intense pain in his body and stood up. His face had turned pale because of that attack. His entire body swayed as he staggered and was about to fall. He felt that he had lost all his spiritual energy and his spiritual energy had disappeared completely. He could not help but look at the red figure in shock. His heart was in turmoil and he was unable to calm down for a long time. Could it be that she had already done something when there was an abnormality in his body and the spiritual energy was constantly being released? Could it be that she was not just fooling around and teasing him, but had already schemed against him? She had predicted that he would not be able to suppress his anger and come to settle the score with her. She had predicted that he would kill her. She had also predicted that he would lose all his spiritual energy and would not be able to hurt her at all. What a good plan. Step by step, he had stepped into her trap without him knowing. She wanted to get rid of him. After today, would Zhe let him stay? Impossible. The pressure and the air in the sky dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Below, the air in the air gradually dissipated and the pressure dispersed. Fingzhou, who had been standing quietly, looked at Han Rong, who was looking at her in shock. The corners of her lips curled up and she revealed an evil and cold smile. Just as her lips curled into a cold smile, a red figure flashed and appeared in front of Han Rong. She grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up against the tree behind him. You want to kill me? Han Rong's eyes narrowed. His throat was choked and he was powerless as he was lifted up against the tree. Just a moment ago, he wanted to kill her and thought that he would definitely be able to kill her. Who knew that in the next moment, the situation would turn around? A mere servant dares to be half a master in this manner. I thought you were a smart person, but it seems that I have overestimated you. Her cold voice rang out, and the hand around his neck tightened. Looking at his narrowed eyes, she laughed coldly and threw him to the side, right in front of Xianyuan Mose, who had been standing there for a while. I won't deal with this person. He's your man, so you can deal with him. When it came to people who wanted her life, she would never leave them alive. If this person wasn't one of Xianyuan Mose's men, she would have snapped his neck with one hand. Xianyuan Mose stood there, followed by Hui Lang and Ning Yi. Hui Lang, who had witnessed the previous scene with his own eyes, felt his heart was still beating wildly at this time. He only felt that it was extremely incredible. At this time, when he saw the ghost doctor throw the heavily injured Han Rong in front of his master for him to deal with, his heart froze and he couldn't help but look at his master. Han Rong had not only watched his master grow up, he had also saved his master and his son's life. Otherwise, his position in this manner would not be so special. Chapter 13:23. In an instant, almost everyone's eyes fell on Xianyuanmo's and Han Rong, both in the dark and in the open. They couldn't guess how their master would deal with Han Rong. After all, he was worthy of being addressed as Uncle Han by their master, which was enough to prove that he was different from them. Even so, after he tried to kill Fingzhou, would their master still tolerate him? The atmosphere seemed to have condensed at this moment. Everyone held their breaths as they watched. After Han Rong stood up with his heavily injured body, he looked at Xianyuanmo's. His lips moved slightly as he opened his mouth. "Aw." Hiss. "Aw." Just as he opened his mouth to say the first word, before he could even say the word "zay," he let out a shrill scream. That scream pierced through the sky and rushed into the clouds, crashing into everyone's eardrums. It was accompanied by the splattering of blood in front of everyone's eyes, deeply shocking everyone's vision and heart. They only saw their master raise his hand and a sharp blade of air flew out, chopping off Han Rong's right arm. The moment the arm flew out, the blood splattered all over the ground. It was a ghastly sight, everyone's hearts tightened. At this moment, they all lowered their heads, not daring to look at their master's expression. They only stared at the blood splattered on the ground and the severed arm, as well as the screaming Han Rong who was holding his severed arm and enduring the intense pain. They saw the disbelief on his face, the unwillingness on his face, and a crazy hatred growing in his eyes. Xianyuanmo's retracted his hand and stood with his hands behind his back. His deep and serene eyes were as deep as a lake, chilling to the bone. He looked condescendingly at Han Rong who had fallen to the ground. A cold and emotionless voice accompanied by a bloodthirsty murderous intent came out of his mouth. "I have said before, you are not allowed to touch my woman. Looks like you didn't take it to heart. A slave bullying his master, do you think I won't kill you? Even though you have watched me grow up, you still don't understand my character." His cold gaze carried a bone-chilling coldness as he stared at the person who was sitting in a daze. He watched as the blood that reached his shoulder seeped out from between his palms and dripped to the ground, blooming into snowflakes. "I respectfully call you Uncle Han because you've been by my mother's side for so many years. You've also saved the lives of my mother and me when we were young. However, it's not for you to control me as an elder, and it's not for you to have the right to kill my woman." As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his palm, and a force came out from his palm, directly sucking the person on the ground over. A powerful spiritual aura condensed in his palm, and he slapped the person's dantian across the air, shattering the person's dantian. Under everyone's shocked gazes, he destroyed the person's cultivation. Then, he raised his hand and threw the person back to the ground. "You touched my reverse scale. This is the price you have to pay." Xianyuanmo's flung his sleeves and stood with his hands behind his back. His cold voice contained a frightening pressure as he said, "In Yi Hui Lang, expel him from the imperial city. He is never allowed to take a step into the imperial city again." "Yes." The two people responded in a deep voice and took a step forward to take the person out. At this time, Han Rong, with one arm broken and his cultivation crippled, was seriously injured. At this time, he no longer had the strength to speak. He could only stare at Fingzhou with a pair of malicious eyes, as if he wanted to remember her face in his mind. Chapter 13:24. From being in charge of the Black Dungeon to having his cultivation crippled and banished from the Imperial City, it was as if he had fallen from the sky to the ground. An ordinary person would have bitten off their tongue and committed suicide after such an incident. After all, to a fairy realm expert, having his dantian shattered and his cultivation crippled was worse than being killed. How could he get used to the life of an ordinary person if he was used to the life of an expert? Moreover, they looked at the figure being taken away. With every step that Ing Yi and Hui Lang took, Han Rong's body and face changed visibly. He quickly aged and became an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. For a cultivator, once his cultivation was destroyed and his strength was crippled, he could only become an ordinary person. His lifespan, which was originally increased by his cultivation, would also be reduced because of his cultivation. Han Rong, who was banished like this, would definitely die soon. Xianyuan Mo slowly walked up to Fengzhou and asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." She looked at him and asked, "He saved your life and your mother's." "So that's how it was." Hui Lang only told her that he had watched Mo's grow up. He did not mention that he had saved their lives. However, even if he knew, today's scene was inevitable. She only needed to ask a little to know his eating habits. Even if he wanted to, he would not be able to guard against her. If he did not want to kill her, today's result would only be him making a fool of himself. However, the moment he wanted to kill her, the result would be different. The surrounding people silently retreated, leaving only the two of them in the same place. Even so, it can't be used as a life-saving talisman to kill you. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Feeling the reality of her in his arms, his heart finally calmed down. God knows how anxious and furious he was when he saw that scene. He was afraid that something would happen to her, and even more afraid that the person who hurt her was someone close to him. If that was the case, he would not be able to forgive himself. Fortunately, she was fine and standing in front of him. "Sorry, I made you worry." Fengzhou wrapped his arms around his waist and pressed his face against his chest, apologizing softly. Although she was prepared, he didn't know. When she heard his anxious and worried voice coming from the manor, she didn't feel good. He rested his chin on the top of her head and gently stroked her soft hair with one hand. He said slowly, "It's good that you're okay." In the imperial palace, when the monarch heard the news from the secret guard, he was furious and slammed his hand on the armrest. This Han Rong actually wants to kill Fengzhou. How audacious! Who did he think he was? Even a servant dares to be so lawless. How presumptuous! The shadow guard lowered his head and reported, "The crown prince has already chopped off one of his arms, crippled his cultivation, and expelled him from the imperial city." Humph. If he didn't do that, I wouldn't mind helping him. I've long disliked that Han Rong. The monarch gave a cold snort. He was quite satisfied with Xianyuan Mo's actions. However, because of this, it has alarmed the various powers in the imperial city. Other than the monarch sending this subordinate to investigate, the various powers in the imperial city have also sent people to investigate. This subordinate estimates that in a day or two, the news of the crown prince having a woman by his side will spread. Chapter 13:25. After a long while, he waved his hand. "Forget it, let's not bother about him. He can handle his own matters." As he spoke, he stood up, flung his sleeves, and walked out. As the news of the crown prince cutting off one of Han Rong's arms and banishing her spread, the various powers in the imperial city were curious as to who that woman was. Thus, they secretly asked around. However, the people in the crown prince's residence were tight-lipped, and they could not get any information out of them. They did not even know what that woman looked like. They could only ask around on the streets, and they found out that the woman was dressed in red, and her face was covered by a veil. Crown Prince Xianyuan Mo did not have a single woman by his side all year round. Now that such a woman had suddenly appeared, and he had even crippled an important person by his side for her, it was obvious that this woman had a special place in his heart. However, no matter how curious they were, they could not find out any other information about that woman. A few days later, in the residence, Fengzhou was resting on a soft couch in the courtyard with his eyes closed, while Xianyuan Mose was taking care of business at the stone table beside him. Dong had been sent away, and the remaining 3 people, after witnessing the scene from a few days ago, had lost all interest in Xianyuan Mose. They even avoided him, afraid that if they got too close, Fengjiu would be angered and punish them. On the evening of the day that Han Rong was banished, the 3 of them knelt in front of Fengjiu and told him everything that Han Rong had asked them to do. They did not dare to hide anything. Fengjiu already knew about this, but seeing that the 3 of them were more obedient, he did not pay much attention to them. He only allowed them to stay by her side to assist her, and when she was about to leave, he would arrange for them to be in the outer courtyard. She lay on the soft couch with her eyes closed, and waved her hand to dismiss the few people who were massaging her legs. She looked at the sky, and then looked at Xianyuan Mose, who was taking care of business. She paused for a moment and said, "Mose, I plan to leave." As soon as she said this, the busy Xianyuan Mose paused and looked at her. "You're leaving? So soon? Didn't you say you have a few months?" Fengjiu rolled his eyes. "I've been living here for more than 2 months. Including the journey back and forth, isn't that a few months? Can't you stay for a few more days?" he asked with a slight frown. He looked at her and said, "Actually, you can let me handle your matters." This way, she wouldn't have to leave and could stay by his side. However, he knew that she didn't want to rely on him. He knew that she wanted to become stronger. Thus, even if he was reluctant, he could only let her handle it herself and train herself. "Stay for 2 more days. I'll stay for 2 more days before leaving." She sat up and said, "I'm already here, what's there to be reluctant about? What's more, as long as I have the chance, I'll come back to see you. You can tell me where you want to go. That way, I can go and see you." Unexpectedly, she smiled slyly. "I'm not telling you." Hearing this, he sighed helplessly. "All right. Even if you don't tell me, I'll find out in the future. Since you're leaving, I won't do anything else these 2 days. I'll accompany you. You should go and take care of your business. Don't delay it." Chapter 13:26. "Do you really want to accompany me?" She blinked, and her eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, as if she was thinking of something evil. "Yes," he replied and waited for her to continue. She immediately jumped up and said, "Then let's change our clothes and go out. You can put on a beard while you're at it." Hearing this, he glanced at her with a strange expression and said, "Didn't you think that I'm too old?" She kept calling him uncle, and now she wanted him to change into Ling Mohan. She held back her laughter and said, "Why would I? Even if you're old, you're still a very handsome and cool uncle. Don't worry, I won't dislike you no matter what. It's just that if you go out with me like this, you'll be too eye-catching, especially when those women are staring at you. So, it's better that we change our appearance when we go out to play." Thus, she pushed him into the room and called Hui Lang to help him change into his clothes and put on his beard. She quickly went into the room and found a green robe to put on, and then slightly trimmed it before walking out of the room. When she came out, she saw Xianyuan Mose, who was wearing a gray robe and had a big beard on his face, sitting there drinking tea. She immediately walked up to him with a smile and looked at him from head to toe. "Uncle, you look so friendly. Sigh, I haven't seen you with a big beard in a long time." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's mouth twitched. He glanced at her and saw that she was wearing a green robe, which was inconspicuous and not ostentatious. Even her face had been groomed. He nodded and said, "You look good, let's go." He stood up and naturally held her hand as they walked out the door. Seeing the 2 of them go out, Hui Lang and Ing Yi watched from behind. After a while, Hui Lang elbowed Ing Yi beside him and said, "Do you think we should follow them?" Yes, Ying Yi said and had already moved forward. Seeing this, Hui Lang grinned and also moved forward, following behind them secretly. When the two of them followed in the dark, they saw the bearded man holding the hand of a white-robed youth walking on the street. Ying Yi's eyes flashed and a smile appeared in his eyes. On the other hand, Hui Lang was even more direct. He grinned and looked at the two people who acted as if there was no one else around them. Master is so domineering. You see, the entire street seems to only be occupied by the two of them. Two grown men holding hands on the street. This scene is so strange no matter how you look at it. As long as Master thinks it's good, it's fine. Don't talk too much. Ying Yi said in a low voice. Hui Lang couldn't help but grin when he saw the crowd sizing up the two of them from time to time. He didn't say anything else and just quietly followed them in the dark. Xianyuan Mose completely ignored the gazes around him. He held her hand and looked around. When he saw a small stall selling sugar-fried chestnuts on the street ahead, he walked over with Fengjiu. Give me a pack. As soon as he finished speaking, the money was already placed on the stall. Okay. The peddler's tone was brisk. He quickly packed a pack of sugar-fried chestnuts and handed it over. Guest, your sugar-fried chestnuts are delicious. Come again next time. As he spoke, he curiously looked at the two holding hands. These two grown men were actually holding hands on the street. That was way too bold of him. Chapter 13:27. Here, open your mouth. She brought the peeled chestnuts to his mouth. At that moment, the people on the street who were curious about the two of them could not help but widen their eyes when they saw them. Xianyuan Mose glanced at the people on the street who were looking at them curiously with wide eyes. He looked a little embarrassed and a little uncomfortable, but his heart was faintly jumping with joy and joy. He was uncomfortable and embarrassed because he had never acted like this in front of others, but he was happy because Fengjiu was not afraid of the people's gazes and intimately fed him food. This kind of feeling was just like a public display of affection. Thinking of this, he proudly glanced at the people around him. Under those people's gazes, he opened his mouth and ate the chestnut she brought to his mouth. His ears were slightly red, but his face was still cold. He nodded and said, it tastes good. It was more than just good. It was so sweet that it entered his heart and made him feel like he was floating. Fengjiu did not know what he was thinking. In addition, half of his face was covered by the big beard, so she could not see his expression clearly. She only knew that he habitually kept a straight face and looked like he did not want anyone to get close to him. She smiled and said, You like it? Then I'll peel it for you. Okay. Her short reply couldn't hide the joy in her eyes and the joy in her heart. The two of them walked and strolled. When Fengjiu came across something interesting, she would stop to take a look and touch it, while Xianyuan Mose would ask from the side, You like it? I'll buy it. After walking down a few streets, Fengjiu could not help but facepalm. Don't buy any more. I just looked at it a little longer. If I buy everything that I looked at a little longer, it would be a waste. Besides, there are some things that I don't need. It's okay. I have money. Hearing his domineering words, Fengjiu could not help but laugh. She looked at him and said, Yes, I know you have money. You're amazing. This man, how could he be so cute? Pfft, two country bumpkins. Suddenly, a disdainful voice rang out, attracting their attention. The two of them looked at each other, then looked at the person who spoke. They saw a few well-dressed young masters with two women standing not far away. One of them was holding a fan in his hand and was leisurely fanning himself. His eyes were looking at them with disdain and contempt. They're not just two country bumpkins. I think they're gay. How can it be normal for two grown men to act so intimately on the street? Xianyuan Mose glanced at them and frowned. His eyes were filled with displeasure. Fengzhou chuckled and held his hand. Don't worry about them. Let's go. They were just irrelevant people. Why should he get angry over them? Moreover, what did they know? One had to know that sometimes, what one saw with their eyes might not be true. Of course, they wanted to leave and didn't bicker with them, but those people thought that they were easy to bully because they backed down. Unexpectedly, they raised their voice and said, "Hey, didn't you say you have money? Do you dare to go somewhere with us to play?" Xianyuan Mose and Fengzhou continued to walk forward, pretending not to hear. What? You don't dare. A few men stepped forward and blocked their way. They stared at their clothes and said, "You dare to say you have money in front of this young master? How arrogant!" Chapter 13:28. Ingyi glanced at him. It's that bastard brother of his, using his concubine mother's favor to stir up trouble all day long. Pfft, at this time he's provoked Master and the Ghost Doctor. His ability isn't small either. When I go back and tell Yang Yong about it, I reckon his face will darken. Alright, stop talking. Look in front. Ingyi gestured for him to keep quiet. Fengzhou, who was originally preparing to leave, stopped in his tracks and sized up the person, asking, "Are you very rich?" That person raised his chin like a proud peacock, "Of course." "Brat, you're not from here, right? You don't recognize this young master?" "That's right, this is young Master Yang, an aristocratic family from the imperial city. His elder brother, Yang Yong, is a favorite of the crown prince." The two men standing next to him laughed as they announced Yang Yong's identity. When they heard this, Xianyuan Mo's and Fengzhou's expressions changed, a strange look flashed across their eyes. Yang Yong's younger brother. This guy. The two of them carefully sized him up again, seeing that this person was only at the peak of the foundation establishment stage, not even a golden core stage cultivator. He was dressed like a noble young master, but this kind of temperament, this kind of posture, made people not dare to be respectful. "Where did you say we were going?" Fengzhou asked with a smile, his eyes flashing with a cunning light. When they heard this, they looked at each other, revealing a cold smile. That bastard brother of Yang Yong glanced at the two of them, then turned to leave. "Follow me if you have the guts." He turned to leave, the people behind him also followed. It was very obvious that he was the leader of the group. "Let's go and have some fun," Fengzhou said with a smile, pulling Xianyuan Mose to follow them. "It can't be. The place you were talking about is the casino." Fengzhou looked at the noisy place in front of her. The sounds of people placing their bets and opening their hands messily entered her ears. She had been in the imperial city for so long, but this was the first time she had been to a casino in the imperial city. Looking at the scale, it was actually quite big. What? Scared? This is the most luxurious casino in the imperial city. You'll need at least 10,000 gold coins to enter this place. Today, you're only able to enter because of me. Yang Yong's younger brother had a smug look on his face as he took out an identity jade card and led them inside. As for the two women who had been following him, they stopped outside the casino and left. After all, they were women. If news of them entering such a place spread, it would be bad for their reputation. Therefore, they did not follow them in. Fengzhou looked at the small mountain of gold coins on the table, and his eyes lit up. "Scared, I'm really scared. I didn't expect there to be such a place in the imperial city." If Ning Lang, who loved money as much as his life, came here, he probably wouldn't be able to take a step forward. Xianyuan Mose, who was next to her, saw her eyes shining as she stared at the gold coins and treasures on the table. He couldn't help but shake his head. Her interests and hobbies seemed to be different from ordinary girls. He, so it's third young Master Yang who has come. A steward came out to greet them. In the midst of the lively scene, he cupped his hands and bowed to the man surnamed Yang. He looked at the two men beside him, as well as Fengzhou and Xianyuan Mose, and asked, "Third young Master Yang, did you bring your friends here to play? What do you want to play today?" Chapter 1329. Brat, what are you playing over there? This young master called you here so that you can bet with me. He shouted in annoyance. I'm going to win some money first. Fengzhou replied without turning her head. She stared at the two colored cups on the table and heard the people around her shouting for big and small. She grinned and shouted, "Big." Xianyuan Mose watched her play and did not stop her. Seeing her win a lot after a few rounds, many people around them exclaimed that this youth was lucky. But, luck? As for her, he had never thought that she relied on luck. Pfft! Didn't you say you were rich? So you don't even have money? Yang San sneered and opened his fan. He glanced at the young man who was gambling enthusiastically, then looked at the bearded man and asked, "Hey, aren't you going down to play a few rounds?" Xianyuan Mose did not even pay attention to him. His attention was only on Fengzhou. All in. Fengzhou shouted and pushed the small mountain of gold coins in front of him to the side of the big cup. You're betting big again. You've already won 5 rounds of big, there's no way you're betting big again. That's right, that's right. Little brother, you're betting so much money on big. Aren't you afraid that you'll lose everything in small? What's there to worry about? Of those who could come here to play, which one of them didn't have money? Maybe they won't even care about this little bit. That's true. Ha ha ha, then I won't bet. I won't bet on big with him. I'll bet on small too. Small. I'll definitely bet on small this round. Good, good, good. I'm done betting. At the same time, the cover of the cup was removed, revealing the numbers inside, 4, 5, 6, big. Ha ha ha, I won again. Fengzhou said happily. He withdrew his hand and put the gold coins in front of him. He took out his chinkuan pouch and began to put them in. The people around them could not help but feel jealous. Little brother, are you betting big or small this time? I'll bet with you this round. That's right, I'll follow you too. Little brother, do you want to buy big or small? All of them were asking questions, thinking that they would definitely win if they followed this young man. Unexpectedly, the young man smiled and waved his hand. I'm not playing anymore. I'm going to play with the one over there. You guys continue. With that, he left the table. Look, we've won so much. She handed the chinkuan pouch to Xianyuan Mose with a face full of joy. I didn't expect you to have some skills. Yang San glanced at Fengzhou and said, let's go. Let's go up there and play big. You have money. Fengzhou raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. If you don't have real money, I won't play with you. Tisk. Do you think I don't have money? Don't you know that our Yang family is the wealthiest among the aristocratic families in the imperial city? As he spoke, he turned to the steward beside him and said, lead the way, get a table on the 2nd floor. All right, third young Master Yang, please come upstairs. Everyone, please come upstairs. The steward gestured for them to go up, and at the same time, glanced at Fengzhou. They had gambled a few times and won all of them. This was definitely not a fluke. However, this third young Master Yang had been in the casino for a long time and had some skills. It would be difficult for this young man to beat him. Chapter 1330. Stepping into the second floor, it was obviously different from the first floor. The upper floors were separated by rooms, but they were not enclosed rooms. Instead, there was a screen separating each long table. There were also chairs placed beside the tables. The tables on the first floor did not have chairs. Everyone was crowding around the tables gambling. It was obvious that the difference on the second floor was slightly better. She glanced around. Because of the screen, she could only vaguely see people sitting at each long table, but she could not see the bets on the table. They were led by the manager to another long table. The few of them sat down and the servants served tea and snacks. At the same time, a woman in tight clothes was sent over to ask them how they would like to play. "How do you want to play? Tell me. I'll go easy on you." As Yang San spoke, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Fengzhou and Xianyuanmo's with disdain. "Since you have so much money, of course we'll gamble," Fengzhou said matter-of-factly. He picked up the gambling cup on the table and shook it. He asked, "Just the two of us? Do they want to play?" He looked at the other two men. "Yes, we have to play with you no matter what, right?" The two of them said in unison. They naturally dared to gamble. After all, as the children of aristocratic families, they still had some money on them. Moreover, with Yang San around, they naturally felt more at ease. After all, Yang San had learned gambling skills before. "All right, let's play the most direct game, big or small." "No problem." The few of them began to play. Xianyuanmo's watched from the side and did not say anything. Among the two of them, he did not play. Only Fengzhou played with them. When Fengzhou won one round after another, Yang San was still able to hold his ground. As for the other two, their foreheads were already sweating. "Should we bet on big or small?" The two of them looked at Yang San and asked. "Small." Yang San frowned and said. After betting gold coins, the two of them could only take out their valuables and bet. When the results came out, big again, their faces instantly turned pale. "There's nothing left. We've all lost. This is going to be troublesome. How am I going to explain this when I get back?" The two of them sat there absent-mindedly, watching as even the valuables on their waists were taken away by the young man. Looking at his satisfied and happy face, they were so angry that they clenched their teeth, but there was nothing they could do. In the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, they had already lost to the point that they had even taken off their clothes. Their upper bodies were naked, only wearing a pair of pants that reached their thighs. They were ashamed and angry. If they had known that this kid's gambling skills were so good, they wouldn't have gambled with him even if they were beaten to death. However, even if they regretted it now, they couldn't get back what they had lost. "Get out," Xianyuanmo's glanced at them, feeling that the two men's bare upper bodies were an eyesore. The two of them only felt a powerful and intimidating pressure coming at them, causing their faces to turn pale. They didn't even dare to speak or resist. They just stood up and walked out just like that. They went down the first floor and quickly left. Fengzhou, who was sitting at the side, held his chin with one hand and tilted his head slightly to look at Xianyuanmo's. He smiled and asked, "Do you want to play a few rounds as well?" "No need, you can play," he said and took a sip of tea. "You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.